coming on the air with a stare and a glare, and former President Trump inside a New York City courtroom. Day one of his civil fraud trial, even as he goes after the judge who could decide the fate of his business empire. Why he decided to show up even though he didn't have to, and the new details we're learning from inside court. Plus, right now, a desperate race to find a little girl in New York, gone missing after camping with her family. The new update just moments ago from police. Plus, what her family is telling our team tonight. We're live from the search headquarters. Plus, yet another potentially historic strike in yet another major industry. What it could mean for patients right away if 75,000 healthcare workers walk off the job. Then the new warning from Tom Hanks about dental plan ads and what AI has to do with it. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are hearing for the third time today from former President Trump in New York after tense moments in court in a civil fraud case that could decide the fate of the business empire he's accused of lying about. And this extraordinary moment, look at this, the New York Attorney General, that's Letitia James in the front row, staring at the former president at the defense table there. Our team in the room says he glared right back while walking out of court for lunch in day one of the first of several government trials against Mr. Trump. The former president at times got pretty animated talking to all of his attorneys. Our team telling us at points his face turned beet red as he was wagging his finger. The accusation against him here, that he exaggerated how much his company was worth to the tune of billions. With that, AG, Letitia James, making clear what the stakes are as she sees it.
My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
So remember, this is a civil trial. It's not a criminal one, so no jail time's at issue here, but money definitely could be at issue. Mr. Trump could maybe end up paying hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties, with the fate of some of his most famous New York properties on the line and the potential for him to get banned from doing business in New York again. Mr. Trump insists he didn't do anything wrong. He's reiterating that outside court, showing up today, although he didn't have to. So why is he here? Listen.
Mr. Trump, why do you want to be here in person today? Because I want to watch this witch hunt myself. I've been going through a witch hunt for years. This is really now getting dirty.
Our NBC News team is covering this from every angle. Legal analyst Danny Savalos is with us, but I want to start with Rahima Ellis, who is outside that courthouse in New York. So day one of a trial that will probably last for a couple of months here. And you've seen this dynamic where the former president has, in that very courthouse, gone after the judge who is going to act as a jury here, right? It's a bench trial, meaning there's not a jury. The judge is going to make the decision. Donald Trump attacked him and then just in the last few minutes thanked him. If our heads are spinning, help us understand it.
Yeah, your head should be spinning. There was a lot of confusion about what was Donald Trump talking about, because he was saying he wanted to congratulate the judge. He was pleased with the judge for what the judge had to say from the bench this afternoon, just moments ago when this the court ended for the day. Donald Trump said that he appreciated the judge, indicating that he was willing to at least consider limiting the scope of the evidence that would be presented in this trial, not bringing in as much evidence from 2011, where so much of the evidence seems to come from, and maybe limiting it to starting at 2014. And I'll let our legal eagle explain all of the particulars of why that's so important. But former President Trump did say he thought that was a great thing, and he was pleased with the judge. Now, this is a flip-flop from when he came out at lunchtime, and he said simply, this is a judge who should be disbarred. This is a judge who should be out of office. This is a judge that some people say can be charged criminally for what he's doing. He's interfering with an election, and it's a disgrace. Donald Trump went on to say this afternoon as he was leaving that this is interfering with his ability to be on the campaign trail, and he would rather be there than here. But this is where he was today. Hallie?
Well, and you heard him explain, Rahima, why he wanted to be there, right? He said that he wanted to witness what he described as a witch hunt firsthand, because he could have just stayed at his home. He could have been on the campaign trail, as you note. He said, I'd love to be campaigning instead of doing this. There is a political component to this, as there are for, frankly, all of the legal issues that the former president faces. Part of this is that he has seen in the past, and he alluded to this, fundraising spikes. When he talks to supporters, when he tells his supporters, hey, they're coming after me.
Yeah, and his supporters are standing steadfast with him. every single time Donald Trump says something about how he is being persecuted, if you will, that he is being unfairly targeted in a way that no one else would, it resonates with his supporters. He was campaigning just recently, and listen what some people who are staunch Trump supporters had to say.
I mean, if he's guilty of that kind of thing, it's not good, but I mean, I would probably still support him.
They're going to do whatever they can to try to get to him. I'm still voting for him.
They'll do anything to make him look bad because they are afraid he's going to win.
The judge didn't have a clear grasp on the distinctions in market value and assessed value. So they were just, what the Democrats are doing now is that they're breaking any law.
And following what happened here today, you can expect that Donald Trump supporters will continue to reiterate comments like that, standing steadfast with Donald Trump as they always have. Hallie?
Rahima, you are at the courthouse. Donald Trump left there just a few minutes ago. He is now, we understand, just arriving back at Trump Tower, where he'll remain overnight. We expect him, based on some of our sourcing, to be back in court, back in that courtroom again tomorrow. And I'm struck by so many of the optics that we've seen, beyond simply the facts of the matter here, the idea that the former president's accused of wildly exaggerating how much some of his properties were worth, how much his business was worth. You had Letitia James very clearly looking at the former president. You have that reporting that the former president stared at her as he was walking out. And then he had this moment where, for a few seconds, cameras were allowed to take some sort of establishing shots of court, and the judge did a little sort of cheesing, if you will. Let me show it to people.
Sir.
Hallie, were you able to show that moment?
We just were. So the judge takes off his glasses, kind of smiles. You see him shrugging there. You know, this is part and parcel of what you might see at a moment like this. The optics here, and every single bit of it dissected.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who are in Donald Trump's camp, they will look at this and say something negative about the judge being unfair and taking light of this situation. For others who have a different opinion, they might see it differently. So the judge said earlier today, when he first got on the bench, that he intended to not say much at all, that he wanted to keep the words that were spoken today in the courtroom, that would be from the prosecution and from the defense, making their arguments in this case. What he meant by what he was doing and taking his glasses off, it is up to interpretation. And we'll have to leave it to the judge. Maybe one day he will explain it. Perhaps he will not. What you noticed in that shot was he took his glasses off and he just shrugged. He didn't say much of anything at all, Hallie.
Rahima Ellis, thank you very much. Let me bring in our legal analyst, Danny Savalos, here. Okay, so let's get to the legal piece of this. Rahima has laid out the political backdrop. We are hearing the former president and his team essentially argue that nobody was hurt here with the allegations, again, in this civil, not criminal trial against him. Let me play for you a little bit of what we heard from Mr. Trump in this vein. Watch.
The banks got back their money. Again, there was never a default. There was never a problem. Everything was perfect. There was no crime.
So he's arguing that because no banks were hurt, he says, there was no crime, that this whole point is moot, essentially. He's also getting on his Truth Social platform, essentially trying to poke holes in the validity of the prosecution. He's also going after the judge. Give us the reality check. How should we be thinking about this? Is what Donald Trump's saying at all helpful to his defense from a legal strategic perspective?
Yeah, the fact that no one's actually harmed doesn't make conduct less fraudulent. And these are not criminal charges. And the other thing to point out, too, is to argue that a bank wasn't actually hurt because you paid back all your loans on time. That's not really a good argument, because what happens when you lie to banks about how much money you have, how much capital you have, how much your property is worth, what you do is you're subjecting the bank to risk that it may not even be aware of, but risk nonetheless. So the argument is that by submitting false statements of financial condition, these these banks took on risk that they never would have or never should have had they been fully apprised of the situation. And so it's one of those risks, one of those harms that can exist without even the victim knowing about it, in this case, the bank, not being aware that it might have been giving out loans or relying on these statements of financial condition. So irrespective of whether or not Trump paid back the loans on time, there's still a harm, there's still a risk, there's still a victim.
We expect this trial to last for weeks, if not months, probably more on the month's end. We're looking at maybe December. That's the estimation right now. Former President Trump is on the witness list to perhaps give testimony of his own. So is Ivanka Trump, his daughter, Eric Trump and Don Jr., who, of course, have been top executives at the Trump Organization. What does this look like? How significant are those moments going to be?
They're going to be very significant if and when they take the stand, but be assured that if they come into any area that might arguably expose them to some kind of criminal consequences, they're likely either going to avoid taking the stand or plead the Fifth Amendment and avoid testifying about that issue. Now, in civil court, there are consequences for pleading the Fifth Amendment. It can include deeming the issue established in a way that would never, ever happen in criminal court. In other words, it's not a violation of the Constitution for there to be consequences for not testifying, for asserting your Fifth Amendment in civil court. Big difference from criminal court.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. More coverage later tonight here on NBC News Now of all of the day's developments. Appreciate it. Tonight, police are expanding their search for a 9-year-old girl who went missing from a New York campground over the weekend, as her family is asking for help to get her home safely.
If you think you saw anything weird, call the state police. Just be vigilant and keep your eyes peeled, for anything weird and suspicious that may be helpful to the investigation.
Charlotte Senna had been biking with family and friends near their campsite at Moreau Lake State Park in Saratoga County. This is Saturday night. She then said that she wanted to bike around a loop there one more time by herself, according to officials. When she didn't come back, about 15 minutes later, her parents went to look for her. They found the bike, but not her. Kathy Park is joining us now. And Kathy, we are getting an update in from police in just the last few minutes. Tell us more about what we're learning tonight in this search for this little girl.
Yeah, Hallie, obviously this is a family's worst nightmare. And within the past hour or so, New York State Police provided an update, and they said this is an expanded search for Charlotte Senna. They said there are more than 400 personnel on the ground right now. This is a 24-hour operation, so they have reinforcement at the local level. They have local fire departments pitching in, also private search and rescue groups as well. We should also point out that state police have also requested help at the federal level at this point. And earlier today, our colleague Kristen Dahlgren had a chance to speak with a family spokesperson, Charlotte Senna's aunt. And Kristen asked her, is there a possibility that this 9-year-old could have run away? Here was the response. Take a listen.
She disappeared almost into thin air. I mean, it was minutes between when she was last seen and when she wasn't there anymore.
And Hallie, family members are urging the public that no tip is too small. So if you have any information, if you were here at this park on Saturday into the weekend, please contact authorities right away. You're looking at a photo of Charlotte Senna right now. She's 9 years old, 4'6" tall. She was last seen wearing dark blue pants, an orange Pokemon shirt, a tie-dye shirt, as well as black Crocs. So those are some of the distinguishing factors that police are releasing at this time. Hallie?
Can you give us a sense, Kathy, of what it's been like on the ground for people in the community who are watching this search happen in their backyards?
Yeah, I mean, we were out here for a couple hours, and Hallie, there have been crews out here just kind of combing this massive park. It's more than 6,000 acres, so they certainly have a lot of ground to cover. But New York State Police are saying that they've expanded the search to more than 46 linear miles. But once again, this is a 24-hour operation. But it's important to note that this park is closed to the public until further notice. They want the search efforts to basically move forward with authorities at this time. They don't want any sort of interference with the public. So once again, the park is closed until further notice. Hallie?
Kathy Park, live for us there in upstate New York. Kathy, thank you. New questions tonight in the mysterious death of a freelance journalist and community advocate killed inside his home early today in Philadelphia. Josh Kruger was shot 7 times in the chest and stomach. The shooter apparently ran away. Kruger ran into the street for help. He was rushed to the hospital where he died. No arrests have been made. Police say they don't have a motive, and there weren't any signs that somebody forced their way into the house. Kruger was somebody who was known in Philly as somebody who was a social justice advocate, who was a longtime journalist. He wrote for several news outlets like the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Citizen. He also worked for the administration of Mayor Jim Kenney, who said he was shocked and saddened by Kruger's death. George Solis is joining us now live from Philly. What else do we know about what happened here and how people are responding?
Yeah, Hallie, as you know, any death is obviously tragic, but when it hits home in the journalism community, it is just particularly harder. And a lot of journalists, a lot of members of this community reacting to Josh Kruger's death, saying they cannot believe it. They can't believe that someone would go into his home and fire at him, let alone 7 times. And as you mentioned, police saying this appears to have been a case where there was no forced entry. So they are looking into that. We also have just learned from police within the last hour that there is some surveillance video, a doorbell camera there that they're going to be using to try and find the person or people responsible for his death. And this all happened in the overnight hours. He came out of his home looking for help, we're told, after being shot 7 times, collapsed there in the neighborhood. Of course, residents in that area calling 911. He was rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, he did not make it. And all day today, we've really just been hearing from members of the community, people that knew him, other journalists who have just saying this is such a loss for the journalism community. On his own website, Josh noted that his experience with homelessness, HIV, Philadelphia's street economy, trauma, poverty, all informed his writing. And at this point, like you mentioned, there is no motive, but there are many, many questions about what could have led to his death. One friend telling me that he made a lot of friends in this community, but he also made a lot of enemies. They are careful to speculate, though, on what may have led to this shooting, because at this point, they just don't know. They are just trying to pick up the pieces and deal with this loss right now, Hallie.
Is there any sense or any indication, George, that what happened to him has anything to do with the work that he'd been doing journalistically, with like a story he'd been working on or something of that nature?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the questions that friends have, and certainly one that police have as well. Josh noted several instances on his social media, on Twitter and on Facebook, about just harassment and things that just kind of seemed offbeat. One incident involving a glass egg being thrown through his window. Another about an individual that came to his door that was threatening him. And so, of course, police now looking into this as any possible indication of whether or not this may have led to his death. So a lot of digging left to be done in the early hours of this investigation, Hallie.
George Solis, live for us there in Philadelphia. Thank you. Yet another historic strike may be just 48 hours away, with about 75,000 healthcare workers set to walk off the job in what would be the biggest strike that industry's ever seen. Patients with Kaiser Insurance bracing for what's next, as we're hearing from the head of that union in just the last couple of minutes.
It's huge. It's never happened before in U.S. history, but, you know, the circumstances we find ourselves in are really a crisis point.
The workers are upset over negotiations with Kaiser Permanente on pay, staffing, outsourcing. They say they'll strike for 3 days in 5 states, you see them here, and D.C., starting on Wednesday. It's all part of a key moment for labor unions in this country, with auto workers still off the job, Hollywood actors still off the job. The Writers Guild is just getting back to work after that long strike finally ended. NBC's Liz Kreutz is following this for us. So, Liz, this is different, though, right? Like, this healthcare workers strike would be different from the Hollywood strikes or the auto workers strikes, and that the impact could end up being felt immediately, right away, by patients. Talk to us about the impact there.
Yeah, Hallie, patients for Kaiser with any kind of appointments this week will certainly notice this. And just for perspective, here in California, Kaiser has 9.4 million patients. It's also the largest private employer in the state. So this could have massive implications, even just a limited 3-day strike. Now, as far as what patients should know, Kaiser has put out a statement. They're preparing for this. They say we have contingency plan in place to ensure our members continue to receive safe, high-quality care for the duration of the strike. Our hospitals and emergency departments will remain open. That said, they also have said that it's likely they will have to postpone some appointments and some non-essential surgeries, and that patients should prepare for longer wait times, Hallie.
It is limited, too, right? I mean, we showed the map there. It's just certain states for a limited period of time, just 3 days here. Talk us through where things are at the bargaining table for both of these sides.
Yeah, so the biggest issue here is higher wages and the short staffing crisis. I talked to some nurses who say in their clinics, some people are doing the job of 2 to 3 people. I just finished speaking to the executive director of the Coalition of Kaiser Unions. She is in the negotiating room today. Here's what she said about why they feel they have to strike.
In our case, a lot of our members 10, 20, 30 hours a week of overtime, not just because of short staffing, but also just to make ends meet. Frontline healthcare workers are working so much overtime that the stress and mental and physical toll it takes on their bodies is causing them to reconsider if they can keep going on.
And she also said that these healthcare workers feel like it has an impact on patients, that they're not able to give patients the individual care that they feel patients deserve. Now, Kaiser, for its part, says that they have hired 50,000 frontline workers over the past 2 years, despite labor shortages. They say they continue to hire. But the union, they say that does not take into account the large number of healthcare workers who have also left the industry and left Kaiser over the past 2 years. So that really is the issue at the heart of this debate. And Hallie, as we know, 75,000 healthcare workers are poised to walk off the job for 3 days, largest U.S. healthcare strike in U.S. history.
Clock ticking down to Wednesday now. Liz Kreutz, thank you. A lot of people tonight around the country are sweating their way through the start of October that clearly did not get the autumn memo. In some spots in the Midwest and Northeast, it is feeling hotter today than on an average day in July or August. Look at this. We're talking 25 degrees above where it normally is. Sioux Falls in South Dakota, Green Bay hit new record highs. The Twin Cities has already broken a record, 92 degrees Sunday, the hottest day it's ever seen in October. They actually had to cancel a marathon there because it wasn't safe to run those distances in that kind of heat. I want to bring in meteorologist Bill Cairns now. It's supposed to be pumpkin spice season, Bill. Sure doesn't feel like it.
Hey, are we ever going to talk record lows? You know, like, when's the last time I was on the show with you and we were like, hey, it's really cold somewhere? You know, we just got done with, on the planet, the warmest July ever, the warmest August ever, and it's almost guaranteed it's going to be the warmest September ever when all the climatologists, when they finish adding up all the numbers. So, yeah, it's not a shock, and it shouldn't really surprise any of us, but it's still, I mean, 92 degrees in Sioux Falls at this hour. These are all locations, by the way, that broke record highs today. We were 87 earlier in Milwaukee. Now they got a little breeze coming off the lake. And the temperature we didn't break records everywhere, but they're close. Like in Houston, it's 94. The record's 97. You know, St. Louis is a little shy of yours. Chicago is only about 5 degrees away from your record high. So it's the exceptional warmth is in the Great Lakes and the Northern Plains, but everywhere else is still very, very warm. So as we go through tomorrow, we'll be about 16 degrees warmer than it should be in St. Louis. And as we head towards Wednesday, upstate New York, where the leaves are like peaking, it's apple picking season, Syracuse is going to be in the mid-80s. And it's not really going to cool off quickly. It's just a gradual towards the weekend cooling off. Nashville, 83 to 66. D.C., 78. Saturday, you'll feel refreshing at 68 degrees. So it's going to take a little while, Hallie.
Bill Cairns, thank you very much. Appreciate it. To Washington now, where the House Speaker is learning more about the price he may have to pay for negotiating a deal to keep the government from shutting down his job. In fact, it's looking more and more likely that there will be a vote from inside Speaker Kevin McCarthy's own party to take away his gavel, the whole charge being led by one guy. Listen.
For all the crocodile tears about what may happen later this week about a motion to vacate, working with the Democrats is a yellow brick road that has been paved by Speaker McCarthy.
So that is Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida, now hinting he's going to file this so-called motion to vacate. In normal person speak, that means he'll ask everybody to make Kevin McCarthy not be the speaker anymore. It is very unclear if he will be successful or not. McCarthy thinks he has plenty of support. But there is a big question here. Is he going to need that support from Democrats to keep him in the leadership position he covets? NBC's Sahil Kapoor is following this one for us. Okay, so for those of us like outside the Beltway, right, or those of us even inside the Beltway who are trying not to live amongst the weeds, what are the chances, in very simple terms, that Matt Gaetz and whoever allies with Gaetz is going to be able to successfully kick Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership? Is that going to happen maybe by the end of the week for real?
It's far from clear, Hallie, even to those of us inside the Beltway, even to Republican lawmakers and aides that we are talking to who are the closest to this. Nobody really knows where the votes are at this moment. It's not clear Matt Gaetz has 5 Republican votes on his side, which is the bare minimum that he needs to oust Speaker McCarthy. If he has fewer than 5, then McCarthy can hang on simply on the strength of Republican votes. And there's no question, even for Democrats, it doesn't matter how they vote, McCarthy would be able to hold on to his job. If Matt Gaetz were to have the votes, the most likely suspects would be among those 21 Republicans. And let's show the list who voted against that Republican continuing resolution several days ago. That would be, these are some of the most conservative members of the House. Many of them have been critical of McCarthy. Many of them didn't want him to become Speaker in the first place. Gaetz's likeliest allies would come from that list. But so far, at this moment, there are not 5 members who have openly said they would vote with him to vacate the Speaker's chair. In fact, one of them, Marjorie Taylor Greene, has said she does not believe it would be a good idea. Let's show her tweet. She said, quote, "I don't agree that a motion to vacate will effectively create the changes needed to solve the intentional systemic failure that creates the annual never-ending CRs and Christmas omnibus mega spending packages." She also worries that it would give the upper hand to Democrats. Now, she kind of does have a point, Hallie, that Democrats could be in a position of deciding whether to step in and rescue Kevin McCarthy if, in fact, there aren't enough Republican votes to save him. They're far from settled. They're undecided on how to handle that. Democrats are divided, I should say, based on the conversations we're having with lawmakers and aides as to whether they should go down that route. Some of them say it would be a bad idea to step in and try to save or bail out a Speaker of the House who's impeaching President Joe Biden on, a lack of evidence. They wonder whether it would even be tenable, but nevertheless, they're open to that conversation.
So then, basically, if you're looking at it in, I'm going to call it buckets of drama, right? There is the drama bucket involving Kevin McCarthy remaining Speaker. They took care of the whole drama bucket that was a government shutdown. The government's going to stay open. We'll address that again in 45 days or 43 days from now when the shutdown clock starts ticking all over again or gets close. But you've also got inside the sort of drama piece of Speaker McCarthy, this other essentially important policy bucket, and that is what happens with Ukraine. Matt Gaetz is upset about promises that McCarthy allegedly made to President Biden and Democrats that he'd bring up this issue of more money to Ukraine in the days to come. McCarthy is saying there was no secret deal, basically. Is there a world in which McCarthy both keeps his job and keeps money flowing to Ukraine? Because that is what the president has cast in terms of essentially life or death here, that we've got to continue to support our ally against Russia's invasion.
That would be a real challenge for Speaker McCarthy, Hallie, and it's not, I don't want to say definitively that he can't provide Ukraine aid and also keep his job. It's a little bit unclear how this pans out. What is clear is that McCarthy's hardliners are vociferously opposed to providing additional aid to Ukraine, and it becomes a question of straws on the camel's back. Eventually it breaks, and the more McCarthy defies his hardliners, the more allies Matt Gaetz ultimately finds to overthrow McCarthy, which is one of the reasons the Speaker has been so skittish about aid to Ukraine, despite the clear bipartisan majorities in both the House and the Senate to go forward. But yes, you're right. He has emphatically denied that there is some sort of side deal with President Biden on this issue. Let's roll the tape.
There is no side deal going forward. When we were doing the continuing resolution, Democrats were trying to hold up longer. And the one thing I told them, that in there I believe it gave transferability. I said, if there's a problem anywhere there, we'll correct that, but we're moving forward there.
So that issue remains unsettled. It's a live ball, as are many issues in the next 6.5 weeks when Congress is going to have to vote on an appropriations deal to prevent a government shutdown that was narrowly avoided this time around. Remember, that was the easy part. All they did was continue funding at the status quo level. The hard part is reaching a deal between this Republican-led House and the Democratic Senate and President Biden. Hallie?
Sahil Kapoor live for us on the Hill. Thank you. Coming up, former FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried headed to trial tomorrow in what prosecutors are calling one of the biggest frauds in American history. The details about what he was thinking about spending his fortune on when he had it coming up in the breakdown. Plus, more than 70 people facing charges tonight after that looting spree in Philadelphia. Why even more arrests could be coming up. Officials say 2 people are dead after a bear attack in Canada. More in our 5 things. But first, the New York governor today trying to get a handle on what she calls a migrant crisis in that state. Kathy Hochul saying they will offer thousands of jobs to migrants to try to help get them out of shelters, but she acknowledges there's only so much her office can do.
We don't have enough capacity to house people. We just don't. So our hearts are big, but sometimes you have to realize our resources are limited.
Officials say more than 116,000 people seeking asylum have come to the city since last spring. And hospitals and legal aid clinics say it's starting to stop them from giving American citizens the help that they need. One doctor telling Julia Ainsley this crisis is some of the hardest work they've ever done, and that the COVID pandemic helped prep them for what they have to deal with now.
Immediately when COVID started in New York City, Bellevue stepped up. We increased our capacity across the board. We helped tens of thousands of people. That enabled us, when the asylum seeker crisis began here, to already have those sort of muscles to know how to build capacity quickly to provide all of the care that people need.
Julia is joining us now. She is here with us back from New York. So one of the hospitals that you talked with said that about a quarter of its patients now are actually migrants. Talk us through the impacts of that.
Yeah, that is now across the New York public hospital system. They've seen nearly 30,000 migrant patients in the last year. That's now a quarter of their population. Over 300 babies have been born to migrant moms since this began. You know, they say it's overwhelming. It strains their resources. Sometimes people are waiting in line if they have less critical needs, even if they are taxpayers who are paying into this system. But that they have to prioritize people who need life-saving care, regardless of their immigration status.
It's the triage system that they have to go by, right?
Yeah, and it's the same thing they got used to during COVID. They're used to dealing with really large-scale crises. But Dr. Long, who I met with there, even though he was a big part of the city's response to COVID, he says this is really the hardest work he's ever done.
What about migrants? What are you hearing from them? I know you had a chance to catch up with somebody who I think was from Venezuela.
Yeah, that's right. And the majority of them are from Venezuela. This was this man named Orlando who's getting life-saving cancer treatment. He had esophageal cancer. He said a month ago he wasn't even able to swallow.
Wow.
Now he's able to talk with me, and here's what he had to say.
How is that for you, given your medical condition, to be sleeping on the street?
One asks God for strength, and then you forget about everything else. You just have to imagine it's a good bed, a king size, and you lie down wherever, and that's it.
So he's sleeping on the street at night. This is something that a lot of advocates can try to rally around someone, make sure they get care on one side, but being able to get care across the whole spectrum is hard. And his brother had recently come from Venezuela a few months after he did. They weren't able to find a shelter for both of them. So this is someone who's getting the care during the day, sleeping on the streets at night. And when you're there in the middle of it, I spent almost a whole day inside this hospital. You realize that, yes, people are doing this great work. It's pulling on resources, but that there's also a reason why they're doing it. You're really left with feeling a lot of emotions after a day like that.
Julia Ainsley, reporting as you have been doing now for months and years on that migrant crisis. Thank you so much. We can watch the full report tonight on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. That's 6:30 Eastern, wherever you watch your local NBC station. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, 2 people are still unaccounted for after a deadly nightclub fire in southern Spain. At least 13 people were killed early yesterday. The flames jumped to a couple of clubs nearby. Everybody inside of those places survived. Officials say the nightclub where the fire started had been operating without a permit. It was actually ordered to shut down last year. No word yet on the cause. Number 2, more than 70 people are now charged in that string of smash and grabs, the burglaries, the thefts, the looting, whatever you call it. Remember we talked about this last week? The city's district attorney in Philadelphia says they expect that number to get even higher. A PC Richard & Son, Lululemon, and Apple Store were some of the targeted businesses. Most of the charges are felony burglary and conspiracy. Number 3, a grizzly bear killed 2 people and their dog in Canada's Banff National Park. It took the rescue team more than a day to get to those victims because of bad weather. The bear was found and then euthanized because of its aggressive behavior. Number 4, scientists whose research led to the creation of the mRNA vaccines against COVID are now Nobel Prize winners. Dr. Drew Weissman and Dr. Katalin Karikó developed the technology back in the 90s, but it wasn't really used widely until the pandemic. Now it's being studied to fight cancer and other diseases. The prize also comes with a $1 million award. Number 5, the Swift effect clearly in full effect during the matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Jets with the singer in the stands. You know she was watching Kelsey. Turns out the game, we're just learning, was the most streamed game of any regular season game ever. More women watched, 2 million of them, at at it in just this one game. Chiefs pulled out a late victory, but the real winners may be Swifties and, frankly, the NFL's bottom line. We're going to have a lot more coming up right after the break. New details tonight about the disgraced founder of the FTX crypto exchange and what he reportedly wanted to spend his millions on as Sam Bankman-Fried preps for his fraud trial starting tomorrow. Like, for example, that he was allegedly thinking about paying Donald Trump $5 billion not to run for president, or that he was planning to give Mitch McConnell, the top Senate Republican, millions of dollars to beat so-called Trumpier candidates in Senate races. This is according to a new book from superstar author Michael Lewis, Mr. Trump's spokesperson, pushing back in a statement late today to NBC News, saying it sounds like SBF is trying to deceive people. Still, at issue in court tomorrow, not the money Bankman-Fried was thinking of paying out, but the hundreds of millions of dollars he allegedly took from FTX customers. Mackenzie Sagalos has our breakdown.
Sam Bankman-Fried was on top of the world. He had the millions to book Tom Brady as a spokesman.
I'm getting into crypto with FTX. You in?
3 years after founding crypto company FTX, it was valued at $32 billion, with SBF, as he's called, worth more than half that. It bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat Stadium and got a boost from some superstar power.
It's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
Yeah, I don't think so. And new reporting this week, Michael Lewis, who was working on a book about Bankman-Fried, telling 60 Minutes he even considered paying Donald Trump to not run for president again to the tune of $5 billion.
The question Sam had was not just is $5 billion enough to pay Trump not to run, but was it legal?
A Trump campaign spokesperson telling NBC News Bankman-Fried is a, quote, liar, and saying he is trying to deceive people. In August 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried's face was splashed over the cover of Fortune magazine, comparing him to Warren Buffett.
What about your own legacy, Sam? What impact would you want to leave on the world long term?
I don't give a about my legacy. Like, I care about the impact that I have.
And then it all came crashing down.
Holy hot dogs, the spectacular collapse of one of the world's largest crypto exchanges is being called bigger than Enron.
There's so much we don't know.
Well, here's what we know. He's broke.
And he's in big trouble.
In November 2022, after reports that FTX's affiliated hedge fund Alameda wasn't doing well, investors quickly snatched their money out of the company and the whole operation went down. Within days, FTX filed for bankruptcy, and customers went down with it.
I think it's fair to say that by anyone's lights, this is one of the biggest financial frauds in American history.
In December, Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas, where FTX was based. U.S. federal prosecutors charged him with fraud, saying more than $8 billion of customer money went missing, and accusing Bankman-Fried of using their money to prop up Alameda. He pleaded not guilty. Now his trial starts in New York and could last several weeks. It'll consider whether Bankman-Fried spent customers' money on Alameda, real estate, and illegal campaign contributions. Prosecutors alleging he made more than $100 million in campaign donations in the 2022 midterms alone. From court documents filed so far, it appears that lawyers for Bankman-Fried could present an advice of counsel defense. That's where they would say that he was following the advice of the company's lawyers and didn't realize that what he was doing was illegal. After spending months on house arrest in his parents' California home, Bankman-Fried spent the last few weeks in a Brooklyn jail. A judge revoked his multi-million-dollar bail after he was accused of witness tampering for sharing the personal writings of Caroline Ellison. She was previously his romantic partner and Alameda's CEO. Now she's expected to testify against him.
Mackenzie Sagalos is joining us now, and it is a fascinating scene setter to what we will see unfold starting tomorrow, Mackenzie. I'm struck thinking back when all of this was unfolding as that story was being played, how often Sam Bankman-Fried, even after these allegations came out, talked to the media. He was like real chatty about a lot of this. Do we think he's going to actually take the stand? Like, might he continue that chattiness in court potentially?
That's a great question. And what we do know is that during the 6-week trial, the C-suite of FTX and Alameda, including Bankman-Fried's former girlfriend and his best friend, are expected to testify for the prosecution. At this point, it's unclear whether Bankman-Fried himself will take the stand in his own defense. His counsel declined to comment, and we haven't yet seen a witness list. The government also mentioned 2 more witnesses are finalizing immunity agreements, so some surprise testimony may be coming. We'll certainly be keeping an eye out to see who else might have turned on the former FTX CEO. But, Hallie, I agree. If his track record is any indication, we might be seeing him take the stand here.
What about some of the celebrities that backed FTX, Mackenzie? They're getting sued now, some of them?
Right. So celebrities who were paid to promote FTX, including comedian Larry David and former star quarterback Tom Brady, are being sued by a collective of investors who are seeking damages. That class action lawsuit makes the case that the FTX accounts offered were unlawfully being sold in the U.S. David and Brady are among other A-listers pushing to dismiss the suit, saying that they never pitched those accounts and did not cause the investors' losses.
Thank you so much. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Washington bureau, a jury in Virginia has found a man not guilty of the most serious charge in the shooting of a YouTube prankster. Alan Coley was caught on video shooting Tanner Cook at a mall back in April. Coley asked Cook to stop following him several times before opening fire. The 31-year-old delivery driver claimed he was acting in self-defense. He was found not guilty of aggravated malicious wounding, again, the most serious charge. The jury was split on 2 lesser charges. Out of our Western Bureau, the Coast Guard's looking for a man reportedly bitten by a shark in Northern California, but that search has been suspended. Officials from Point Reyes National Seashore say the unidentified person, this individual they were looking for, they didn't say who it was, had been seen with a group, last seen yesterday morning. So they've paused at this point operations on land as well as in the water and the air. It's not clear why the search was suspended. Out of our Midwest Bureau, this Chicago woman proves you're never too old to try to hit new heights. She's 104, and she's the oldest person now to ever skydive. Go, Dorothy Hoffner, go. She jumps out of a plane 10,000 feet. She's with her instructor there. What a baddie. She lands. I don't know if you're about to see it here, but they cheer her on. She first went skydiving at the age of 100, but she had to do it again to officially break the Guinness World Record. Good for her. Can't catch me doing that at 104, but good for her. Coming up, there's a new ad out with Tom Hanks, except it's not actually the real Tom Hanks, which has the real Tom Hanks really upset. We'll explain. Tom Hanks now warning people to essentially not believe your eyes in the ad for a dental plan you're about to see. Check this out here. You're going to see on the left side of your screen. So that's a screenshot of the ad that Hanks posted on Instagram. She says he had nothing to do with. He's not selling dental plans. He says it's fake. It's AI. On the right, that's the real Tom Hanks. I'm sure you recognize him. That's what he actually looks like. With this moment here, speaking to a bigger, broader AI issue, the fear from some corners that this could end up essentially replacing actors, whether they want it or not. And it goes beyond Tom Hanks. You have Robin Williams' daughter now out saying AI being used to recreate her late father's voice is disturbing. She says she's seen for years now how people want to use this tech to create and recreate actors who cannot consent to it, like her dad. And we know that the way Hollywood uses AI has been a key concern for actors and writers in their talks with the big studios. Jake Ward is joining us now. And Jake, let's start with this Tom Hanks thing, because he's brought this up before a couple months ago on the Adam Buxton podcast. Let me play a little bit of it.
I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and that's it. But my performances can go on and on and on and on and on. And outside of the understanding that it's been done with AI or deep fake, there'll be nothing to tell you that it's not me and me alone.
He's a super famous face, but this concern trickles down to people even sort of below him on the Hollywood food chain, if you will. What protections are there for people like Hanks or others in this instance?
Well, Hallie, you know, at this point, it varies from state to state, and it's a very new and fast-moving part of the law. Fundamentally, you cannot take the likeness of somebody and, here in California, use it in something like an ad, something that has commercial purpose without their consent. You can grab someone's likeness, however, and use it in art or use it as, you know, a piece of fair use, sort of public expression. All of that is perfectly plausible, but you cannot use it to sell things. So So in theory, he'd be within his rights to sue whoever it was that put this together. But I have to tell you, right, ever since this came out, all of us have been looking for what company is this? Who is doing it? It's not clear. It isn't clear exactly where on social media this has appeared, what company might be behind it, or who he would sue if he were going to. And that's the new landscape we're in. You don't need the, the resources of an enormous corporation that you can call up and sue to do something like this. You can be any kind of fly-by-night person with their laptop and bang this out in a matter of moments. That's the new moment that we are in here, Hallie.
That is part of why AI was one of the central points for the Writers Guild, which was negotiating during its strike. They're obviously back to work now, but for actors, it's almost in some ways thornier because it is their face, right? It is their image. It is their picture that is out there representing their work. We've seen some of this stuff come up already. I think of Carrie Fisher, for example, Paul Walker, their likenesses being recreated here. But as this technology evolves, so will the possibilities.
Well, as you say, right, as it evolves, the possibilities change. So let me show you a little clip here of Tom Hanks in Polar Express, the 2004 animated film that terrified children because that technology was not ready at that time. As kids watched this fake sort of, computer-generated version of Tom Hanks speak, they would freak out. This became a warning among people in the CGI world not to go too far with trying to make real actors in an animated form through this technology. But today, when you look right at images of, like you say, Paul Walker or the de-aging stuff that went on with Harrison Ford in the new Indiana Jones movie, or, all of these different pieces, right? We just brought Christopher Reeve back from the dead in the latest Flash movie. This is, of course, what the SAG-AFTRA actors are still fighting with Hollywood about, is the opportunity. At one point, the background actors, extras, were essentially being offered a single day's rate to be scanned in and used for all time. It is, as Tom Hanks, a world in which you could be, have your likeness disappear from your control and go out into the world. But, already we're finding, and he's finding firsthand, that when it comes to fly-by-night, folks, it's happening already, Hallie.
It's a remarkable moment. Jake Ward, thank you. Catch us live 24/7, wherever and whenever you stream. More coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air with a stare and a glare, and former President Trump inside a New York City courtroom. Day one of his civil fraud trial, even as he goes after the judge who could decide the fate of his business empire. Why he decided to show up even though he didn't have to, and some of the new details we're learning about what the vibe was like inside court. Plus, right now, a desperate race to find a little girl in New York, gone missing after camping with her family. The new update late today from police, and what her family is telling our team tonight. That new details just into us on the Philadelphia journalist and community advocate shot and killed inside his home. More on what we're learning from officials who say they still don't have a suspect or motive yet. Plus, yet another potentially historic strike in yet another major industry. What it could mean for patients right away if 75,000 healthcare workers walk off the job this week. And new plans from New York's governor to help asylum seekers get jobs with the city under pressure. More on why doctors are in crisis mode, worried about how to give everybody the care they need later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight we are hearing again today from former President Trump back at his home in New York City after tense moments in court there in a civil fraud case that could decide the fate of the business empire he's accused of lying about. It produced a number of remarkable moments, including this one on camera. Look at this. This is the New York Attorney General in the front row, staring at the former president at the defense table. Our team in the room says he glared right back down at her as he was walking out at one point. All of it on day one of the first of several government trials against Mr. Trump. The accusation against him here, that he exaggerated how much his company was worth to the tune of billions. With that AG, Letitia James, making clear what the stakes are.
The message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
Remember, this is a civil trial, not a criminal one, so no jail time's at issue for Mr. Trump here. But money, well, money could be at issue. He could face hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties, $250 million, with some of his most famous New York properties on the line. It seemed like Mr. Trump, as the first witness took the stand, was visibly upset. Our team says he was wagging his finger, at points turning beet red. And outside that courtroom, talking with reporters, he reiterated he didn't do anything wrong.
Mr. Trump, why do you want to be here in person today? Because I want to watch this witch hunt myself. I've been going through a witch hunt for years. This is really now getting dirty.
Our NBC News team is covering this from all angles. Legal analyst Danny Savalos is joining us, but I want to start with Rahima Ellis, who is outside that courtroom in New York. So the former president is back at his home at Trump Tower after a day that he spent outside court going after the judge who is acting as the jury in this civil trial. Strategically, according to experts, a question mark here. What should we be looking for?
Well, one of the things that was interesting and stunning and yet not stunning at all was because we're talking about former President Donald Trump, is how he reacted to what was going on in the courtroom. You heard that comment that you just played where he was concerned about what was happening. When he left the court this afternoon, he was praising the judge, saying because the judge has been willing to listen to an argument from his attorneys about the possibility of limiting the scope of evidence in this trial. Earlier, he went and he excoriated the judge. He said he should be disbarred. He said that he's engaging in a witch hunt and that he is someone who is preventing him from engaging in the political process of running for president because he's interfering with his ability to campaign. All of this, as we know that there's a long list of witnesses who are coming. Even the former president is expected potentially to return to court. But this is a witness list, Hallie. It's got 28 names on it. And you can see some of those names include Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka, Michael Cohen, who was a former lawyer for Trump, who ended up going to jail, Alan Weisselberg, who was the former CFO for the Trump organization, and he ended up spending some time behind bars because he pled guilty to falsifying business records for personal gain. So those are some of the people. This is the witness list for the prosecution that they're going to be calling to come into this court. Hallie?
There is also a political nexus here. Former President Trump has been all day sending fundraising emails based on this first day of trial, including one in just about the last 90 seconds tonight, Rahima, as he is back at Trump Tower. There is a sense from people close to him that this could actually help him with the Republican primary base, this idea that, as he claims, he's being politically persecuted, even though that's not at all clear it would be helpful in a general election if he's the nominee.
Well, it wouldn't be a surprise if he's able to fundraise off of anything that happens here because he's done it in the past. Every time that he has been indicted or had to appear in court, the former president was able to capitalize on it. So it's no surprise at all that he might be sending out messages on social media suggesting that his followers and those who are supporters of him rally to his cause and rally to his defense, and even in some ways rally to his legal defense, because there are many cases facing this former president, and it won't be surprising again if people actually do donate. Hallie?
Rahima Ellis, thank you very much. Live for us in New York. I want to bring in legal analyst Danny Savalos now. There's an argument that the former president has made as we get into the actual legal piece of this here, the strategy here, that with the accusations against him being that he wildly exaggerated how much some of his properties were worth, how much some of his businesses were worth. He says, well, wait a second, no banks were ever hurt. Listen.
The banks got back their money. Again, there was never a default. There was never a problem. Everything was perfect. There was no crime.
Is that a viable defense strategy that would hold up in front of this judge, do you believe?
It's not, because it ignores the fact that when a bank extends, say, a loan based on a statement of financial condition, and they believe a property is worth X amount when it's really worth a lot less than that, then the bank takes on a considerable amount of risk, suffering harm, even though the bank may not be aware of it. And it's a fundamental idea about victims, is that a victim may not even necessarily be aware of the harm or the risk that you expose the victim to. So that's not really a good argument. And Trump understands that. He understands that loans are based on things like risk, and that by deceiving a bank, you are deceiving the bank about the risk they take on. So not a strong argument. But again, this is not a criminal trial, so these are not victims in the traditional criminal sense of victims. But all the same, not a powerful defense there.
What about the idea that just steps away from where the judge is holding court during these breaks, the former president was going after him, attacking him for being, in his words, a quote-unquote rogue judge? We don't know what evidence he's basing that off of.
I mean, that's chutzpah to go out into the hallway of the courthouse and criticize the judge not more than a few yards away from where the judge is. I mean, it's almost like a dare, you know, and it's the kind of thing where maybe he's going on the offensive like that, like he does with many judges and prosecutors, in the hope that at least with this judge that maybe it'll get him to be a little more careful about his rulings. I don't think that works. I think in any high-profile case like this, the judge is going to be extra careful to try and be even-handed, no matter who appointed him, no matter who elected him, whether it's a state court judge, a federal judge. That kind of public pressure, I guess you would say, just makes them hew more closely to the rules.
We showed that moment where the judge kind of took off his glasses and smiled as the cameras were coming into court there, just to sort of underscore the spotlight that is on this judge that is in this courtroom. What are you looking for in the several months to come? Because, again, we think this trial will last until perhaps end of December.
Well, let's talk about that moment with the judge where he takes off his glasses. I mean, look. This isn't federal court. I mean, I may get in trouble for this, but in state court, judges, I mean, they're more interesting. You're going to find some more colorful personalities in state court, especially in a jurisdiction that elects its judges, as opposed to federal court, where you have a bunch of appointees who have behaved very, very well their entire careers and flown under the radar enough to get appointed without any problems.
Danny Savalos, thank you. Tonight, police are expanding their search for a 9-year-old girl who went missing from a New York campground over the weekend, with her family asking for help to make sure she gets home safely.
If you think you saw anything weird, call the state police. Just be vigilant and keep your eyes peeled, you know, for anything weird and suspicious that may be helpful to the investigation.
Charlotte Senna had been riding her bike with family and friends near their campsite at a state park in Saratoga County late Saturday. She said she wanted to bike around a loop there one more time by herself. When she didn't come back about 15 minutes later, her parents went to look for her. They found the bike, but not her. Kathy Park is joining us now. Kathy, what are we learning from this new update from police?
Hey, Hallie. So within the past hour or so, we learned from New York State Police that this is being considered a missing child investigation. And obviously, this is a serious and active and ongoing search for Charlotte Senna. We've learned that more than 400 personnel are on the ground kind of scouring for any clues, any signs of Charlotte. We know local law enforcement are pitching in, as well as the help of federal agents as well. And earlier today, we had a chance to speak with the aunt, the spokesperson for the Senna family, about the ongoing search efforts. Here's more from our conversation earlier today. Take a listen.
She disappeared almost into like thin air. I mean, it was minutes between when she was last seen and when she wasn't there anymore.
Now, family members are urging folks, members of the public, to call in any sort of tip. No tip is small. So they said if you're in the area over this weekend, Saturday night specifically, and you saw something suspicious, call 911 right away. And while you are looking at photos of Charlotte Senna, we should point out that she is 4'6" tall. She has blonde hair, green eyes. She was last seen wearing dark blue pants, black Crocs, and orange tie-dye Pokemon shirt. And Hallie, while we are in front of the park right now, we should point out that it is closed to the public. They are urging the public to stay away from the park as the search continues with authorities. Hallie?
Kathy Park, live for us with the latest on that search in upstate New York. Thank you. New questions tonight in the mysterious death of a freelance journalist and community advocate killed inside his home early this morning in Philadelphia. Josh Kruger shot 7 times in the chest and stomach. Whoever did it ran away, apparently, and Kruger ran into the street for help. He was rushed to the hospital where he died. No arrests have been made. Police say they don't have a motive, and there were no signs that anybody forced their way into the home. Kruger was known in and around Philly as a social justice advocate. He was a longtime journalist. He wrote for several news outlets like the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Philadelphia Citizen. He also worked for the administration of Mayor Jim Kenney, who says tonight he was shocked and saddened by Kruger's death. George Solis is joining us now. George, is there any indication, I know police haven't said anything about potential motive here, but is there any indication that perhaps his journalism, the stories that he may have been working on, had any connection to his death?
Yeah, Hallie, good question, and it's one that authorities are looking into. Of course, any loss of life is tragic, but when it hits a little close to home in the journalism community, I think everyone feels it a little bit more, especially here in Philadelphia, which has been the case. There's been an outpouring of support from people that he knew today. You mentioned some of the work that he was working on. Well, Josh Cougar was very adamant on social media, and vocal, I should say. He did note 2 instances recently, one of which involved an egg being thrown, a glass egg being thrown through his window, another in which a person came to his home and threatened him. Police saying they're looking at all of these as potential motives in the investigation at this time. There is also surveillance video at the home, and police have told me within the last hour that they're going to be looking at that to help them find who may be responsible for this shooting. And as you mentioned, he was shot inside of the home, police saying there was no sign of forced entry. He gets out of the home. Neighbors in the community see what's going on. They call 911. Unfortunately, that is where he died, in the local hospital here. And again, just the outpouring of support that we've been seeing. A lot of people have been rattled by this, including a friend of his, which I think we'd be able to hear from really quickly if we can.
Yeah.
Homicide is a huge problem in Philadelphia, and it's still too early in the investigation to really know if this had anything to do with his prior social media posts that have been mentioned in the press, or if it had something to do with a story that he worked on, or if it was just, unfortunately, another random act of senseless killing in a city that has far too many.
Obviously, we're very early on in this investigation, but a lot of people hoping this one comes to a wrap fairly soon. Hallie?
George Solis live for us there in Philadelphia. Thank you. Yet another historic strike, maybe just 48 hours away, with something like 75,000 healthcare workers set to walk off the job in what would be the biggest strike that industry's ever seen. Patients who have Kaiser insurance bracing for what's next, as we're hearing from the head of that union in just the last couple hours. Listen.
We need long-term solutions to a crisis that's been brewing for years. And the only way that happens is if Kaiser executives listen to frontline healthcare workers.
The workers are upset over negotiations with Kaiser Permanente on pay, staffing, outsourcing. You can see here where they plan to strike in these 5 states plus D.C. It'll last for 3 days, or it's supposed to, starting on Wednesday. It's all part of a bigger key moment for labor unions in this country. You know that auto workers, Hollywood actors are still off the job themselves. The Writers Guild is just getting back to work after that long strike finally ended. NBC's Liz Kreutz is following this one for us. This one is different, right? Because unlike the Hollywood strikes, when, yes, we might not get to see our favorite late night shows, or the car workers strikes, where, yes, it's possible that down the road car parts could get more expensive, this has a pretty immediate impact for patients specifically, potentially.
Yeah, Hallie, absolutely. Patients for Kaiser might notice immediate effects this week if those healthcare workers go on strike. Just for perspective, here in California, Kaiser has 9.4 million patients. It's also the largest private employer in the state. So this could have massive implications. We know 75,000 healthcare workers are poised to strike. This includes some nurses, some lab technicians, some therapists, as well as pharmacists. Now, Kaiser, as far as what patients should know, they have said that we have a contingency plan in place to ensure our members continue to receive high quality care during the duration of the strike. Our hospitals and emergency departments will remain open. That said, they said patients should expect some appointments might be postponed, maybe some non-essential surgeries, and that there will be higher wait times. But Hallie, I mean, the big thing at the heart of this strike right now is the short staffing crisis. Union members say that they are being worked to the brink, some people having to do the work of 2 or 3 people. I spoke, as you mentioned, to the executive director of the Coalition of Kaiser Unions. Here's what she said about why they feel they have to strike.
In our case, a lot of our members 10, 20, 30 hours a week of overtime, not just because of short staffing, but also just to make ends meet. Frontline healthcare workers are working so much overtime that the stress and mental and physical toll it takes on their bodies is causing them to reconsider if they can keep going on.
Now, Kaiser, in response, has said that they have hired 50,000 frontline healthcare workers over the past 2 years, despite labor shortages, and that they continue to hire. But the union is saying that does not take into account what they mentioned, that many healthcare workers are leaving Kaiser and leaving the industry. So they say staffing is a crisis that needs to be addressed, and that's why they feel that they need to walk off the job. Hallie.
Liz Kreutz, thank you very much. We'll see what happens. A lot of people tonight around the country are sweating their way through the start of October, a month that clearly did not get the autumnal memo. In some spots in the Midwest and Northeast, it is feeling hotter today than on an average day in July or August. So it's hotter today than it was on like July 4th. Can you believe it? We're talking 25 degrees above average. Sioux Falls, Green Bay both hit new record highs. So did the Twin Cities. 92 degrees on Sunday. That's the hottest day it's ever seen in October. You see some people running, but they had to cancel a big marathon there because it just wasn't safe. I want to get to meteorologist Bill Cairns, who's live for us now. What's up? Why?
It's the ups and downs of fall, plus the El Nino. We're exceptionally warm, and yeah, it's that time of year where if you're not paying close enough attention, you're walking out the door with a completely wrong outfit on. I mean, some of these areas were just chilly a couple of days ago, and by this weekend, some of these areas that are near 90, like Minneapolis, will be down into the 30s. So it's just kind of that weather whiplash that you get, where we still got summer trying to hold on, and then we're starting to get the hints of fall and the upcoming winter. And some of these areas that are now in the upper Midwest that are near 90 today, I guarantee it will snow by the end of the month. I mean, that's very typical of the northern Great Lakes and the northern plains by the end of October, at least to see some snowflakes. So we just tied the record high in Minneapolis, 89 degrees. Chicago, you're not going to get to 91, but 85 still warm enough. Many areas are still exceptionally warm. Not a record in Houston, but you're done. I mean, it's been an exceptionally warm summer year all through the Gulf Coast and on the East Coast, and it's just ridiculous. So on Tuesday, Green Bay is about 21 degrees warmer than they should be. New York will be about 13 or so. By the time we get to Wednesday, Syracuse will be about 20. The leaves are at their peak, and people are going to be out there wearing shorts and T-shirts, leaf peeping. By the weekend, though, unfortunately, rain comes in, too, right when the leaves are at peak, and that's never good for business. As far as the temperatures dropping as we head into October, it will get a little cooler here this weekend. 83 on Thursday, Nashville, 66 on Saturday, D.C. 68 on Saturday, kind of getting back to where we should be. And then, I said, it's a weather whiplash. Next week, we're colder than average on all of the eastern half of the country, but then we'll talk about record highs in the Northwest. How about some average weather, Hallie? I have this saying, 60 degrees and sunny doesn't exist. It's just like, it's like chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
It does boggle the mind, Bill Cairns. Thank you so much. We'll be talking more in the days to come. Appreciate it. Let's bring it back here to Washington now tonight, where the big question right now is, will Democrats basically bail out House Speaker Kevin McCarthy as he tries to keep his leadership position? We don't know yet, but we do know that McCarthy is learning the potential price he may have to pay for negotiating across the aisle to keep the government open. That price? His job, possibly. It's looking more and more likely that there could be a vote from inside McCarthy's own party to strip him from his gavel. The whole charge being led by one guy. Listen.
For all the crocodile tears about what may happen later this week about a motion to vacate, working with the Democrats is a yellow brick road that has been paved by Speaker McCarthy.
That is Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican, of course, now hinting that he plans to file a so-called motion to vacate. In normal person speak, it means he's going to ask everybody in the House to make Kevin McCarthy not be the Speaker anymore. Is it going to work? Well, we don't know. We don't know what kind of support McCarthy has. We don't know what kind of support Gaetz has. We know McCarthy thinks he has plenty of backup. But there is that big question. Will it last? NBC's Sahil Kapoor is following this one for us. For those of us like outside the Beltway, right, or those of us even inside the Beltway who are trying not to live amongst the weeds, what are the chances, in very simple terms, that Matt Gaetz and whoever allies with Gaetz is going to be able to successfully kick Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership? Is that going to happen maybe by the end of the week for real?
It's far from clear, Hallie, even to those of us inside the Beltway, even to Republican lawmakers and aides that we are talking to who are the closest to this. Nobody really knows where the votes are at this moment. It's not clear Matt Gaetz has 5 Republican votes on his side, which is the bare minimum that he needs to oust Speaker McCarthy. If he has fewer than 5, then McCarthy can hang on simply on the strength of Republican votes. And there's no question, even for Democrats, it doesn't matter how they vote, that McCarthy would be able to hold on to his job. If Matt Gaetz were to have the votes, the most likely suspects would be among those 21 Republicans. And let's show the list who voted against that Republican continuing resolution several days ago. That would be, these are some of the most conservative members of the House. Many of them have been critical of McCarthy. Many of them didn't want him to become Speaker in the first place. Gaetz's likeliest allies would come from that list. But so far at this moment, there are not 5 members who have openly said they would vote with him to vacate the Speaker's chair. In fact, one of them, Marjorie Taylor Greene, has said she does not believe it would be a good idea. Let's show her tweet. She said, quote, "I don't agree that a motion to vacate will effectively create the changes needed to solve the intentional systemic failure that creates the annual never-ending CRs and Christmas omnibus mega spending packages." She also worries that it would give the upper hand to Democrats. Now, she kind of does have a point, Hallie, that Democrats could be in a position of deciding whether to step in and rescue Kevin McCarthy if, in fact, there aren't enough Republican votes to save him. They're far from settled. They're undecided on how to handle that. Democrats are divided, I should say, based on the conversations we're having with lawmakers and aides as to whether they should go down that route. Some of them say it would be a bad idea to step in and try to save or bail out a Speaker of the House who's impeaching President Joe Biden on, a lack of evidence. They wonder whether it would even be tenable, but nevertheless, they're open to that conversation.
So then, basically, if you're looking at it in, I'm going to call it buckets of drama, right? There is the drama bucket involving Kevin McCarthy remaining Speaker. They took care of the whole drama bucket that was a government shutdown. The government's going to stay open. We'll address that again in 45 days or 43 days from now when the shutdown clock starts ticking all over again or gets close. But you've also got inside the sort of drama piece of Speaker McCarthy, this other essentially important policy bucket, and that is what happens with Ukraine. Matt Gaetz is upset about promises that McCarthy allegedly made to President Biden and Democrats that he'd bring up this issue of more money to Ukraine in the days to come. McCarthy is saying there was no secret deal, basically. Is there a world in which McCarthy both keeps his job and keeps money flowing to Ukraine? Because that is what the president has cast in terms of essentially life or death here, that we've got to continue to support our ally against Russia's invasion.
That would be a real challenge for Speaker McCarthy, Hallie, and it's not, I don't want to say definitively that he can't provide Ukraine aid and also keep his job. It's a little bit unclear how this pans out. What is clear is that McCarthy's hardliners are vociferously opposed to providing additional aid to Ukraine, and it becomes a question of straws on the camel's back. Eventually it breaks, and the more McCarthy defies his hardliners, the more allies Matt Gaetz ultimately finds to overthrow McCarthy, which is one of the reasons the Speaker has been so skittish about aid to Ukraine, despite the clear bipartisan majorities in both the House and the Senate to go forward. But yes, you're right. He has emphatically denied that there is some sort of side deal with President Biden on this issue. Let's roll the tape.
There is no side deal going forward. When we were doing the continuing resolution, Democrats were trying to hold up longer. The one thing I told them that in there, I believe it gave transferability. I said, if there's a problem anywhere there, we'll correct that, but we're moving forward there.
So that issue remains unsettled. It's a live ball, as are many issues in the next 6.5 weeks when Congress is going to have to vote on an appropriations deal to prevent a government shutdown that was narrowly avoided this time around. Remember, that was the easy part. All they did was continue funding at the status quo level. The hard part is reaching a deal between this Republican-led House and the Democratic Senate and President Biden. Hallie?
Sahil Kapoor live for us on the Hill. Thank you. Lots more ahead this hour. A church roof collapsing with dozens of people inside the building. New details on that search for survivors in Mexico. Plus, ahead of the fraud trial of now disgraced FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, some potential bombshells in a new book about the big money he was reportedly willing to pay to influence our elections. That's coming up. New details tonight about the disgraced founder of the FTX crypto exchange and what he reportedly wanted to spend his millions on as Sam Bankman-Fried preps for his fraud trial starting tomorrow. Like, for example, that he was allegedly thinking about paying Donald Trump $5 billion not to run for president, or that he was planning to give Mitch McConnell, the top Senate Republican, millions of dollars to beat so-called Trumpier candidates in Senate races. This is according to a new book from superstar author Michael Lewis, Mr. Trump's spokesperson, pushing back in a statement late today to NBC News, saying it sounds like SBF is trying to deceive people. Still, at issue in court tomorrow, not the money Bankman-Fried was thinking of paying out, but the hundreds of millions of dollars he allegedly took from FTX customers. Mackenzie Sigalos has our breakdown.
Sam Bankman-Fried was on top of the world. He had the millions to book Tom Brady as a spokesman.
I'm getting into crypto with FTX. You in?
3 years after founding crypto company FTX, it was valued at $32 billion, with SBF, as he's called, worth more than half that. It bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat Stadium and got a boost from some superstar power.
It's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto. I don't think so.
And new reporting this week, Michael Lewis, who was working on a book about Bankman-Fried, telling 60 Minutes he even considered paying Donald Trump to not run for president again, to the tune of $5 billion.
The question Sam had was not just is $5 billion enough to pay Trump not to run, but was it legal?
A Trump campaign spokesperson telling NBC News Bankman-Fried is a, quote, liar, and saying he is trying to deceive people. In August 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried's face was splashed over the cover of Fortune magazine, comparing him to Warren Buffett.
What about your own legacy, Sam? What impact would you want to leave on the world long term?
I don't give a about my legacy. I care about the impact that I have.
And then it all came crashing down.
Holy hot dogs, the spectacular collapse of one of the world's largest crypto exchanges is being called bigger than Enron.
There's so much we don't know.
Well, here's what we know. He's broke.
And he's in big trouble.
In November 2022, after reports that FTX's affiliated hedge fund Alameda wasn't doing well, investors quickly snatched their money out of the company and the whole operation went down. Within days, FTX filed for bankruptcy, and customers went down with it.
I think it's fair to say that by anyone's lights, this is one of the biggest financial frauds in American history.
In December, Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas, where FTX was based. U.S. federal prosecutors charged him with fraud, saying more than $8 billion of customer money went missing, and accusing Bankman-Fried of using their money to prop up Alameda. He pleaded not guilty. Now his trial starts in New York and could last several weeks. It'll consider whether Bankman-Fried spent customers' money on Alameda, real estate, and illegal campaign contributions. Prosecutors alleging he made more than $100 million in campaign donations in the 2022 midterms alone. From court documents filed so far, it appears that lawyers for Bankman-Fried could present an advice of counsel defense. That's where they would say that he was following the advice of the company's lawyers and didn't realize that what he was doing was illegal. After spending months on house arrest in his parents' California home, Bankman-Fried spent the last few weeks in a Brooklyn jail. A judge revoked his multi-million-dollar bail after he was accused of witness tampering for sharing the personal writings of Caroline Ellison. She was previously his romantic partner and Alameda's CEO. Now she's expected to testify against him.
Mackenzie Sigalos is joining us now, and it is a fascinating scene setter to what we will see unfold starting tomorrow, Mackenzie. I'm struck thinking back when all of this was unfolding as that story was being played, how often Sam Bankman-Fried, even after these allegations came out, talked to the media. He was real chatty about a lot of this. Do we think he's going to actually take the stand? Might he continue that chattiness in court potentially?
That's a great question. And what we do know is that during the 6-week trial, the C-suite of FTX and Alameda, including Bankman-Fried's former girlfriend and his best friend, are expected to testify for the prosecution. At this point, it's unclear whether Bankman-Fried himself will take the stand in his own defense. His counsel declined to comment, and we haven't yet seen a witness list. Now, the government also mentioned 2 more witnesses are finalizing immunity agreements, so some surprise testimony may be coming. We'll certainly be keeping an eye out to see who else might have turned on the former FTX CEO. But, Hallie, I agree. If his track record is any indication, we might be seeing him take the stand here.
What about some of the celebrities that backed FTX, Mackenzie? They're getting sued now, some of them?
Right. So celebrities who were paid to promote FTX, including comedian Larry David and former star quarterback Tom Brady, are being sued by a collective of investors who are seeking damages. That class action lawsuit makes a case that the FTX accounts offered were unlawfully being sold in the U.S. David and Brady are among other A-listers pushing to dismiss the suit, saying that they never pitched those accounts and did not cause the investors' losses.
Mackenzie Sigalos, thank you very much. I know you'll be watching, so will we. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, more than 70 people are now charged in that string of smash and grabs across Philadelphia last week. You know, that looting spree, essentially, we covered here on the show. The city's DA says they think even more people will end up arrested. Lululemon and an Apple store were just some of the businesses that were targeted. Most of the charges here are felony burglary and conspiracy. Number 2, a second police force over in the UK is launching an investigation into actor Russell Brand. They say they got some new information about harassment and stalking allegations from a few years ago. Brand is already facing allegations of rape and sexual assault, which he denies. Number 3, the United Auto Workers Union coming to a temporary agreement today with Mack Trucks. It's a deal that's supposed to give more money to employees. It still has to be ratified by the full union to go into effect. Nearly 4,000 employees were at risk of striking on that front. Now, if you're like, well, wait a second, aren't they already striking? They are against GM, Ford, and Stellantis. That is a separate thing. No resolution there. Number 4, the post office rolling out a new Ruth Bader Ginsburg stamp today. There she has her black robe, her white collar. It is a forever stamp. It'll cost you right now 66 cents. Number 5, it is October, which means obviously it's time to start getting into the Christmas spirit. And Mariah Carey is not wasting any time about it. She is announcing her Merry Christmas One and All tour with more than a dozen shows across the country starting next month. It'll end at Madison Square Garden mid-December. I think technically she waits until November 1st to belt out, the beginning bars of All I Want for Christmas. But, it's 92 degrees out in Twin Cities. So let's talk about the holiday season. Coming up here on the show, an Olympic stadium has been evacuated and shut down. We'll tell you why the biggest arena in Greece is being called unsafe. Plus, under pressure, how one of New York City's biggest hospitals is handling a ton of patients who are undocumented migrants. Why doctors are getting worried the city might not be able to properly care for everyone. Stay with us. New York Governor Kathy Hochul today trying to get a handle on what she calls a migrant crisis in the state. She says they'll offer thousands of jobs to migrants to try to help get them out of shelters, but she acknowledges there's only so much her office can do.
We don't have enough capacity to house people. We just don't. So our hearts are big, but sometimes you have to realize our resources are limited.
Officials say more than 116,000 asylum seekers have come to New York City just since last spring. And hospitals and legal clinics say that's starting to prevent them from giving American citizens the help they need. One doctor telling Julia Ainsley this crisis is some of the hardest work they've done, and that the COVID pandemic helped prepare them for what they have to deal with now.
Immediately when COVID started in New York City, Bellevue stepped up. We increased our capacity across the board. We helped tens of thousands of people. That enabled us, when the asylum seeker crisis began here, to already have those sort of muscles to know how to build capacity quickly to provide all of the care that people need.
Julia is joining us now. She is here with us back from New York. So one of the hospitals that you talked with said that about a quarter of its patients now are actually migrants. Talk us through the impacts of that.
Yeah, that is now across the New York public hospital system. They've seen nearly 30,000 migrant patients in the last year. That's now a quarter of their population. Over 300 babies have been born to migrant moms since this began. They say it's overwhelming. It strains their resources. Sometimes people are waiting in line if they have less critical needs, even if they are taxpayers who are paying into this system. But that they have to prioritize people who need life-saving care, regardless of their immigration status.
It's the triage system that they have to go by, right?
Yeah, and it's the same thing they got used to during COVID. They're used to dealing with really large-scale crises. But Dr. Long, who I met with there, even though he was a big part of the city's response to COVID, he says this is really the hardest work he's ever done.
What about migrants? What are you hearing from them? I know you had a chance to catch up with somebody who I think was from Venezuela.
Yeah, that's right. And the majority of them are from Venezuela. This was this man named Orlando who's getting life-saving cancer treatment. He had esophageal cancer. He said a month ago he wasn't even able to swallow.
Wow.
Now he's able to talk with me, and here's what he had to say.
How is that for you, given your medical condition, to be sleeping on the street?
One asks God for strength, and then you forget about everything else. You just have to imagine it's a good bed, a king size, and you lie down wherever, and that's it.
So he's sleeping on the street at night. This is something that a lot of advocates can try to rally around someone, make sure they get care on one side, but being able to get care across the whole spectrum is hard. And his brother had recently come from Venezuela a few months after he did. They weren't able to find a shelter for both of them. So this is someone who's getting the care during the day, sleeping on the streets at night. And when you're there in the middle of it, I spent almost a whole day inside this hospital. You realize that, yes, people are doing this great work. It's pulling on resources, but that there's also a reason why they're doing it. You're really left with feeling a lot of emotion emotions after a day like that.
Julia Ainsley, reporting as you have been doing now for months and years on that migrant crisis. Thank you so much. We are just learning in the last couple of minutes here that the New York Attorney General plans to be back in court again tomorrow for what will be day 2 of that civil fraud trial against former President Trump. That's according to a person familiar with the plans of Letitia James. This is all far from the end of Mr. Trump's legal issues right now. Noah Pransky has our breakdown with more.
With more than a half dozen civil and criminal cases on his plate, let's sort out what Donald Trump faces in each state. Civil case number 1, the New York Attorney General's case, now headed to what's expected to be a lengthy trial. A judge recently ruled that Trump and his family and their companies fraudulently inflated the value of their real estate, allowing this case to go to trial. The proceeding will determine other liability and penalties, which could total $250 million, as well as a ban on Trump business dealings in New York. The former president has repeatedly denied wrongdoing, and his attorney has already said he'll appeal the liability ruling. Civil case number 2, also out of New York, this one filed by columnist E. Jean Carroll. Here, a jury found Trump committed sexual abuse in 1996 and later defamed Carroll after she went public with her story. They did not find him liable for rape, but ordered him to pay $5 million total in damages. Trump denies wrongdoing and has appealed the ruling. In September, Carroll filed another civil case against Trump for similar comments he made in 2019. He has denied those claims as well. There's also criminal case number 1 out of Manhattan for allegedly falsifying business records to conceal another crime. A grand jury made up of 23 New Yorkers chosen at random indicted the former president for his alleged involvement in hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels in 2016, then concealing it to prevent the news from damaging his presidential campaign. Trump and his attorneys denied the accusations, and Trump pleaded not guilty.
There were no facts in there. I mean, normally in an indictment you have alleged facts.
Then there's Florida, the documents case. Among the criminal charges, conspiring to obstruct justice. It was federal prosecutors this time with a hefty, detailed filing alleging the former president hoarded classified documents containing national military and nuclear secrets, shared them with friends who had no security clearance, then conspired to hide and conceal some of them from a federal grand jury. The former president again denied the charges and pleaded not guilty.
The baseless indictment of me by the Biden administration's weaponized Department of Injustice will go down as among the most horrific abuses of power.
Criminal indictment number 3 came out of Washington, D.C. It's been described as the January 6th case, but it's really about the entire period after the 2020 election. The criminal charges here include conspiracy to defraud the United States. Special counsel Jack Smith wrote in a scathing indictment, the purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud. He went on with great detail to describe how the former president deliberately disregarded the truth, was determined to stay in power, and developed criminal plans to defeat the federal government. Trump called the indictment fake, and his attorneys have suggested his actions were protected by the Constitution. He pleaded not guilty. And the 4th criminal indictment came out of Georgia. Prosecutors said the grand jury recommended charges against 19 defendants, including former President Trump. He was hit with 13 felony counts, including racketeering and a half dozen conspiracy charges related to the 2020 election.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
Trump pleaded not guilty, denied wrongdoing, denied any pressure campaign, and called this investigation as well a political witch hunt. The timeline on these cases remains uncertain, but one thing we know for sure, the Constitution does not prohibit an indicted candidate from running for office, nor even a convicted one. Noah Pransky, NBC News.
NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Mexico, officials say at least 10 people have been killed, 60 hurt after the roof of a church collapsed. You're seeing some of the video there. They think it was probably caused by some kind of structural failure, they say. Church officials say it's a miracle it didn't happen earlier in the day when nearly 300 people had been inside at Sunday Mass. In Austria, construction workers are converting the birthplace of Adolf Hitler into a new police station. This is after years of debate over what to do with that building. The Austrian government said they wanted to prevent the site from becoming a pilgrimage for neo-Nazis. And out of Greece, officials in Athens are closing down the stadium that hosted the 2004 Olympics for repairs urgently after they found rust along the arches of the roof there. The stadium still hosts soccer matches and concerts. It had to be evacuated in the middle of a national bridge tournament after it failed a safety inspection. Officials aren't sure when the stadium's going to reopen. Still ahead, Tom Hanks wants you to know he doesn't care about your dental plan. I'm kidding here. But what he does care about is this fake AI dental plan ad that he says isn't him. The issues of AI, consent, and the new digital age we're in just a minute. Tom Hanks now warning people to essentially not believe your eyes in the ad for a dental plan you're about to see. Check this out here. You're going to see on the left side of your screen. So that's a screenshot of the ad that Hanks posted on Instagram. She says he had nothing to do with. He's not selling dental plans. He says it's fake. It's AI. On the right, that's the real Tom Hanks. I'm sure you recognize him. That's what he actually looks like. With this moment here, speaking to a bigger, broader AI issue, the fear from some corners that this could end up essentially replacing actors, whether they want it or not. And it goes beyond Tom Hanks. You have Robin Williams' daughter now out saying AI being used to recreate her late father's voice is disturbing. She says she's seen for years now how people want to use this tech to create and recreate actors who cannot consent to it, like her dad. And we know that the way Hollywood uses AI has been a key concern for actors and writers in their talks with the big studios. Jake Ward is joining us now. And Jake, let's start with this Tom Hanks thing, because he's brought this up before a couple months ago on the Adam Buxton podcast. Let me play a little bit of it.
I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, and that's it. But my performances can go on and on and on and on and on. And outside of the understanding that it's been done with AI or deep fake, there'll be nothing to tell you that it's not me and me alone.
He's a super famous face, but this concern trickles down to people even sort of below him on the Hollywood food chain, if you will. What protections are there for people like Hanks or others in this instance?
Well, Hallie, you know, at this point, it varies from state to state, and it's a very new and fast-moving part of the law. Fundamentally, you cannot take the likeness of somebody and, here in California, use it in something like an ad, something that has commercial purpose without their consent. You can grab someone's likeness, however, and use it in art or use it as, you know, a piece of fair use, sort of public expression. All of that is perfectly plausible, but you cannot use it to sell things. So in theory, he'd be within his rights to sue whoever it was that put this together. But I have to tell you, right, ever since this came out, all of us have been looking for what company is this? Who is doing it? It's not clear. It isn't clear exactly where on social media this has appeared, what company might be behind it, or who he would sue if he were going to. And that's the new landscape we're in. You don't need the, you know, the resources of an enormous corporation that you can call up and sue to do something like this. You can be any kind of fly-by-night person with their laptop and bang this out in a matter of moments. That's the new moment that we are in here, Hallie.
That is part of why AI was one of the central points for the Writers Guild, which was negotiating during its strike. They're obviously back to work now, but for actors, it's almost in some ways thornier because it is their face, right? It is their image. It is their picture that is out there representing their work. We've seen some of this stuff come up already. I think of Carrie Fisher, for example, Paul Walker, their likenesses being recreated here. But as this technology evolves, so will the possibilities.
Well, you know, as you say, right, as it evolves, the possibilities change. So let me show you a little clip here of Tom Hanks in Polar Express, the 2004 animated film that terrified children because that technology was not ready at that time. As kids watched this fake sort of, you know, computer-generated version of Tom Hanks speak, they would freak out. This became a warning among people in the CGI world not to go too far with trying to make real actors in an animated form through this technology. But today, when you look right at images of, like you say, Paul Walker or the de-aging stuff that went on with Harrison Ford in the new Indiana Jones movie, or, you know, all of these different pieces, right? We just brought Christopher Reeve back from the dead in the latest Flash movie. This is, of course, what the SAG-AFTRA actors are still fighting with Hollywood about, is the opportunity. You know, at one point, the background actors, extras, were essentially being offered a single day's rate to be scanned in and used for all time. It is, as Tom Hanks, a world in which you could be, you know, have your likeness disappear from your control and go out into the world. But, you know, already we're finding, and he's finding firsthand, that when it comes to fly-by-night, folks, it's happening already, Hallie.
It's a remarkable moment. Jake Ward, thank you. Catch us live 24/7 wherever and whenever you stream. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.